You deceived us. I'm not saying you personally, I mean, of course. The United States promised that there would be no NATO expansion to the east. But it happened 5 times. 5 waves of expansion. This is one of Putin's favorite talking points. He attributes this promise to Manfred Warner, NATO's Secretary General from 1988 to 1994. The latter, however, never publicly stated that NATO should not expand. German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher called on NATO to guarantee to the Soviet Union that it would not expand eastward. NATO, however, did not answer that call. They started the war in 2014. Our goal is to stop this war. And we did not start it in 2022. This is an attempt to stop it. There is a video recording when a plane strikes Donetsk from above. Ukraine carried out the first airstrike on Donetsk, more precisely on the Donetsk airport, which had been seized by Russian-backed separatists the day before, on May 26, 2014. By that time, Russia had already sent its special forces into Crimea and held a referendum on the annexation of the peninsula. Moscow subsequently increased its support for the self-declared People's Republics, sending additional money, arms, and manpower. But since Danzig was not given up, the corridor was nonetheless forced. The Poles forced it. They overplayed and forced Hitler to start World War II. Putin's assertion that Germany was somehow compelled to attack Poland on September 1, 1939, justifies Hitler's actions, relieving the Nazi chancellor of his responsibility for starting the Second World War. Such a statement qualifies as the rehabilitation of Nazism, a criminal offense in Russia. Viktor Yanukovych came to power. Moreover, when he won for the first time, after President Kuchma, they organized a third round, which is not provided for in the Constitution of Ukraine. It is true that the Ukrainian Constitution does not provide for a third round of voting in a presidential election, but no such third round ever occurred. The second round of the presidential election, held on November 21, 2004, in which Viktor Yanukovych was declared the winner, was discovered to have been marked by irregularities. Ukraine's Supreme Court ruled that it was impossible to determine the winner due to the volume of falsification. The results were legally annulled, and a repeat of the second round was held in December 2004. Europeans, in particular, told us it's necessary to create conditions for the final signing of the documents. As soon as we withdrew troops from Kiev, our Ukrainian negotiators immediately threw all our agreements reached in Istanbul into the trash and prepared for a prolonged armed confrontation with the help of the USA and their satellites. In reality, by the end of March 2022, the Russian offensive on Kiev had collapsed. Russian troops suffered heavy losses. Later, the Russians were forced to withdraw from Kharkiv Oblast and Kherson, and that can't be explained by negotiations with Ukraine or requests from Western leaders. You say Hitler has been gone for so many years, 80 years, but his cause lives on. People who killed Jews, Russians, and Poles are still alive. And the current president of today's Ukraine applauds him in the Canadian Parliament. They give him a standing ovation. In fact, not everyone who fought against the Soviets during World War II was a Nazi or a collaborator. For example, the Stepan Bandera-led wing of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, OUN, waged war simultaneously against the Nazis, the Poles, and Soviet partisans. And the Polish Home Army fought against both Nazis and Soviet occupiers.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You.
I was busy that day.
In the war of propaganda, it's very hard to beat the U.S. because the U.S. controls all global media and many European ones. The ultimate beneficiaries of the largest European media are American funds. The dependence of the European press on the United States has been greatly exaggerated. Ownership of the world's largest publications, such as The Guardian and Der Spiegel, is in the hands of national private businesses and trusts that ensure their editorial independence. As for the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline, according to reports by The Washington Post and Der Spiegel, Roman Chervinsky, a colonel in Ukraine's Special Operations Forces, organized the explosions. Even if this version of events is inaccurate, the claims put forth by Putin about an American operation remain wholly unfounded in publicly available fact. We were negotiating with Ukraine in Istanbul. We had reached an agreement. He knew about it. Moreover, the leader of the negotiation group, Mr. Arhami, I think that's his name, still leads the faction of the ruling party, the president's party in the Rada. He still heads the president's faction in the Rada, in the country's parliament, still sits there. He even preliminarily signed this document I'm telling you about. But then he publicly declared to the whole world, "We were ready to sign this document, but Mr. Johnson, then the UK Prime Minister, dissuaded us from doing so and said that it's better to fight Russia. They will give us everything to regain what was lost in the confrontation with Russia." Putin completely twisted David Arahami's words. He claimed that Ukraine had refused Russian conditions after Arahami had allegedly signed a peace deal in Istanbul in 2022. Arahami didn't sign the document and suggested that the Kremlin publish a copy of it. After all, if Putin was telling the truth, Moscow should have one of the copies of the document with Arahami's signature.